Did you know that Napa wasn't one of America's first wine regions? Actually, the East Coast and New York was making wine way before Napa was even a thing. And even if you think you know New York wine, you might want to stick around because you might learn a thing or two that would surprise you. So, New York was actually making wine back in the 1600s when the Dutch and French Huguenots were trying to grow grapes. They just weren't that successful at least with the European Vitis vinifera grapes that they were trying to plant. But in the 19th century, the region began to experiment with French-American hybrid grapes. And these hybrid grapes were a mix of the traditional French grapes that people were used to making wine with and the American native grapes that could stand up to the harsh, cold winters that New York experiences. And these grapes were really successful, and a lot of these are still around in New York today. And there's a region in New York called the Hudson River Valley. And this is a valley that was carved out by glaciers, and there still is a river at the bottom of it. And the combination of the valley itself and the river inside really helps moderate the temperature. So it doesn't get too warm in the summer or during the day. It doesn't get too cool at night. The water helps offset some of the freezing. And so this is an area where there are a lot of wineries today. And wineries started popping up all along this valley. And they were growing grapes and they were making wine, and then bam, Prohibition hits. And just like most of America at the time, the wine production stopped. But there were a few wineries in the area that survived Prohibition by growing grapes for sacramental wine, which was a legal loophole at the time for wineries to continue making wine. A lot were producing juice or wine for the churches because this was allowed. And there's one winery in the area that got through this Prohibition period called Brotherhood Winery. And this is actually the oldest continually operating winery in the entire United States. So from the moment it opened in 1839 through today, it has been producing wine. It produced sacramental wine during Prohibition. And the winery has exchanged hands a few times, but it operates almost like a little mini town. There's some old cellars underneath the winery that people can go and still visit today. They host events there, and they're cool to walk through, but the winery itself is more of a tourism spot than a serious winery these days, although they do make wine. But there are a number of very serious, high-quality wineries in the Hudson Valley today. But how did they get there? So to understand the Hudson Valley, we have to understand a neighboring AVA called the Finger Lakes. And if you know New York wine, you may have heard of the Finger Lakes. So as I mentioned, in the 1800s, Hudson Valley was producing a lot of French-American hybrids, and the climate there was helpful for growing these hybrids. But it wasn't until a gentleman by the name of Dr. Constantin Frank was planting Vitis vinifera, which are European grapes, in the Finger Lakes region. He was planting a lot of Riesling and some other varieties in that area and proving that they could grow and they could work. And so some of those then migrated over to the Hudson Valley. And the Hudson Valley today does produce Riesling. It produces some Pinot Noir, which can grow because the temperatures aren't too harsh because of the moderating effects of the valley and the river. But the Hudson Valley may be most known for growing a grape called Cabernet Franc. And today I have a Cabernet Franc and a Cabernet Franc Rosé from a winery called Fjord, which is in the Hudson Valley. And I don't know about you, but I like to drink while I talk about wine, so I'm going to crack open this bottle of Fjord. But first, this is the Fjord Cabernet Franc. This right here is a 2022. It's from the Hudson River region. And let's crack this open and see what it tastes like. I'm not going to lie, I do love a good screw cap, and historically screw caps kind of got a bit of a bad reputation, but screw caps are amazing, so don't diss on screw caps. They actually prevent the wine from getting oxygenated if it's not a wine that you want to get too much oxygen into it, and let's be real, they are super convenient. I don't always carry a corkscrew with me, so I do appreciate this. But let's take a look at this Cabernet Franc. So if you've not heard of Cabernet Franc before, it may sound familiar to you if you've heard of Cabernet Sauvignon. But Cabernet Sauvignon is actually the offspring of two very familiar parent grapes, one being Sauvignon Blanc and the other being Cabernet Franc, which is how you get Cabernet Sauvignon. But Cabernet Franc doesn't taste like Cabernet Sauvignon. So if you think like big, leathery, red and black fruits, it's kind of a bolder wine. Cabernet Franc is more delicate. It's lighter in color, so I can actually see through my glass here pretty well. It thrives in cool climates more than Cabernet Sauvignon. So Cabernet Sauvignon does better in California. It needs a bit more heat to ripen. Cabernet Franc doesn't. It does well in cooler climates. And Cabernet Franc tends to lean more into herbal and herbaceous notes. So I've had Cabernet Francs before that taste like straight green bell pepper and jalapeno. And sometimes you do get those notes in Cabernet Sauvignon as well. But Cabernet Franc is going to have more red fruits. It's not gonna have the black fruits, the blackberry, black plum that Cabernet Sauvignon gets. So if you like some of the earthy, herbaceous notes in Cabernet Sauvignon, but not the big, bold, spiced tobacco, black fruit, Cabernet Franc might be a good bet for you. But I'm going to try this one here from the Hudson Valley and see what it tastes like. So the first word when I taste this right away is green. It does have those herbaceous notes. This leans more into a green bell pepper than a jalapeno pepper. But it does have a little bit of baking spice as well. So not spicy spice, but some clove in here. Maybe a little bit of like toasty nutmeg. But it definitely has some nice red fruit as well. There's some cherries, strawberry, raspberry in here. But don't think sweet, jammy red fruit. This really is herbaceous. And Cabernet Franc is known for having lighter tannin than Cabernet Sauvignon, so it's definitely not drying my mouth out, but there is some nice balanced tannin here. This is overall a lighter wine. But in general, across all types of wine, we see impacts from the weather for where they're grown. So typically in warmer climates, regardless of the grape, we're going to see riper fruits. The grapes just get more ripe. So Cabernet Franc, because it is a cool climate grape, it grows really well in New York. That's why it leans more into those herbaceous notes. They're just a little bit less ripe. So green bell pepper versus more of a red pepper, tart cherry, then more of a jammy cherry. So that's just a good rule of thumb if you're looking to buy a wine. Look at where it's from, and that can give you some hints into what it's going to taste like on top of what the grape itself tastes like. Cabernet Franc, because it has those herbal savory notes, pairs really well with grilled vegetables and grilled meat that also have earthy savory notes. So think like an herb-crusted chicken or a pork or some grilled vegetables. But honestly, I would drink Cabernet Franc with burgers or even a pepperoni pizza. So don't think you have to get fancy just to pair your wine with your food. But one of the fun things about wine is that any red grape can also be made as a rosé. And so today we have a Cabernet Franc Rosé from Fjord Vineyard as well. And I think this is just such a pretty color. Rosé is always pretty, but this one here is really nice. So the fun thing about rosé, and I feel like we don't talk about this enough when it comes to rosé. So when we talk about wines, white or red, we often talk about the flavors and the profile and the notes we get in the wine. And I feel like we just don't do that often enough with rosé. So rosé can be made from any grape. A lot of times you'll find rosé from Pinot Noir or Sangiovese. But like I said, any red grape can be made as a rosé. Basically, when you're making a rosé, you just take the skins from the grapes out before they turn the wine red. So with red wine, you crush it, you leave the juice and the skins together, and they go through a process called maceration, and that's what gives it its red color. With rosé, you do the same thing, and then you pull the skins out, so it just gets this pink hue. But this means that rosés from different grapes are going to taste different and are going to have different profiles. So rosé from one grape is not going to taste the same as another. And it also depends on how long you leave the skins on the juice. So typically lighter rosés are from grapes with either thinner skins that just have less pigment, or they're left on the juice for a shorter amount of time than rosés with a deeper pigment. So this one here is not super dark. I've had rosés that are almost red wine. They're so dark, but this one's not light either. It's kind of middle of the road. So I think we're going to get some of the structure and some some of the flavors from the grape skins, but it's not going to be overwhelming. But there is only one way to find out, so let's crack this one open. So the fruits on this smell so ripe. I'm getting ripe strawberry as the first note, but also some raspberry here. It almost smells sweet, but I know it's not going to taste sweet, but that's that ripe fruit note that you sometimes get off of rosés that can be a little bit deceiving sometimes. So it's fun to compare the rosé versus the red wine because I'm getting a lot of the same fruit notes here. The cherry, the raspberry, the strawberry. This has really nice acidity on it. It is bright. It's juicy in a not sweet way, but just juicy cherry, juicy strawberry. It tastes like biting into ripe fruit in the summer. But there's also a little bit of that green note. So while the red wine here had a green bell pepper note to it, I'm just getting a little bit of like herb note, almost like maybe thyme, the herb thyme. On the finish, there's no green bell pepper, no really unripe herbaceous notes, but it is interesting that that green herby note is still coming out a little bit in this rosé, but definitely this is going to be, the rosé is going to be more fruit dominant, fruit and acid driven, whereas the red Cabernet Franc here was more herbaceous driven. So just different expressions of the same grape. And I love rosé. So honestly, people may disagree with me on this, but I think rosé is one of the most food-friendly wines, especially when you have a rosé that has a bit of an herby note or a bit more complexity. This can be paired with chicken. This can be paired with the same herb-crusted chicken that I would pair with the red Cabernet Franc. I would pair this with a salad with chicken on it. I would pair this with fish tacos. I would pair this with cheese and crackers. I would pair this with pasta. And maybe I just love rosé, so I just want to drink it with everything. But I would say rosé is very versatile. So if you're looking for a good wine to bring to a party or when you're ordering a bunch of different dishes, if you know there's not going to be really rich red meat, rosé can be a really good choice to pair with a lot of lighter fish, chicken, salad, hors d'oeuvre type foods, regardless of the time of year. There is nothing wrong with drinking rosé in the winter. It is not just a summer wine. So justice for winter rosé. So today we looked at 2 Cabernet Francs from Hudson Valley, but there is so many interesting things going on in Hudson Valley right now. There's a lot of different French-American hybrid grapes, some of which are making really high quality wine, especially some of the whites like Traminette, Sauvignon Blanc, Vidal Blanc. Lots of interesting things happening that we'll have to dig into in a future video. But there's a lot of Vitis vinifera European style wines as well. So Cabernet Franc, of course, there's Riesling, there's Pinot Noir, and I'm seeing a little bit of Albarino pop up as well, which I'm really interested to explore in the future because that's one that I wouldn't necessarily expect in New York, but that doesn't mean it can't be successful there. So one of the fun things that I love about exploring different regions is discovering regions and grape styles that are not always number one on the map. So if you're looking for some New York winery tourism, I love the Finger Lakes. Definitely check out the Finger Lakes, but maybe look at Hudson Valley as well. There's some really great wineries there. If you are visiting, I would definitely recommend Fjord. I would recommend Ben Marl. I would recommend Malaya. And there's a bunch of others. I can post some more on my social media as well if you're looking for more recommendations, or just send me a DM or comment on this video and I can send you some recommendations if you're heading to the area. So let me know in the comments if you are a fan of Cabernet Franc. I feel like this is one that is a bit polarizing for people. They love it or they hate it. So drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you find exploring American wine regions that are a bit off the beaten path interesting, be sure to like this video, hit that subscribe button, check out the rest of my channel, follow me on social media at American Wine Rebel. And until next time, cheers!